Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report. Wherever you get your podcast, you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a few stories up now, a lot on Jaden Daniels, also some injury updates for you that I'm going to get to in a minute that you've probably already read by now. Anyways, but I want to just kind of fill you in on some stuff. For you gold members, I'm going to be doing a private Zoom at 4:30. I'm at Pacific time. So 7:30 Eastern time on Friday. I'm back to Friday this week because I don't know what time I'm going to be done on Thursday. So it's much better to arrange it for Friday. I know by that point I'll be done. And it's going to be about 106 or 7 degrees at that time on Friday out here, which would be 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. I don't want to be outside at that point. So we're going to be doing the Zoom, private Zoom, 7:30 Eastern time. And we'll go from there. So hope you enjoy it. And again, I'm going to be arranging for a player to join us, ex-player to join us soon and bring someone else in there to get a different perspective. But bring your questions. Those are always good conversations. And I hope you guys get something from them. And the members who listen to it later, hope you learn something as well. Anyways, let's get to practice report because I'm here out in Arizona. You can see I'm stuck in a hotel room. And it's such a glamorous living that we live. And so here we go for the practice report. So you already probably know that Austin Ekeler is not going to play in Sunday's game. He's been ruled out with the concussion. What we knew on Tuesday is that he was going to stay in Virginia. Well, once you're back there and like they're out here, you're not sending him out there. So he's been ruled out. Not a big surprise. I mean, I don't think anybody really thought he'd probably play because that when you get it in a short week, it just makes it a lot harder to recover. So the goal would be to get him back for the Cleveland game, which is the following week. But we don't know that. We don't know anything about that at this point. What we do know is he's out for Sunday. And then the other guy out is defensive end Cleveland Farrell. Dan Quinn ruled him out. He's got the knee issue. Now, I did ask Quinn, is this something that is going to necessitate a longer time? They really seem to be confident that he would be back for the Cleveland game. So in his place, and I'll get to Eckler's replacement in a minute, but in his place, they're going to run a few guys, right? They had Dante Fowler in there. They had Andre Jones in there. You had Javonte Jean-Baptiste in there. You had Jamin Davis in there at times. I mean, he's out there. Some of those guys are part of the rotation anyways, obviously, but you can fill in with different ways. They also would put John Allen or Deron Payne at end too and have a three tackle alignment at times with Johnny Newton in there too. So there are ways you can kind of compensate. Farrell's did a nice job. He's a run stopper guy. He obviously has a couple sacks, but he's really a run stopper. And it's a group that just the defense hasn't played well. So anybody you miss is going to be something. But I'm curious to see how a guy like Jean-Baptiste progresses. Andre Jones had a couple plays the other day that were pretty good. And so we'll see. Now, as far as Ekeler goes, they're losing something when they don't have him. And I mean, what he has shown is that he can still play. And he can also help you in multiple ways. As Dan Quinn said, he's really good at taking those 5 and 6 yard passes and turning them into 20-yard gains. And it's not like it's some big strike down the field, but 20 yards is 20 yards. And it's funny because when you watch him, and I talked about this after the first game and just watching how when he catches the ball, how he turns upfield and just why is a guy like that explosive? And it's the way he gets his body turned around. So it's almost like I think I told you like a drop step in basketball. So you just turn and you get upfield. Well, you watch other backs, they don't always do that. This is something he does very well, but it leads to all those extra yards. So, and then also the kick returns, like he does a really good job there. And it's funny because with some of those returns, whether it's on kickoff, especially on kickoffs, and I was talking to some guys here about this, that even in practice, when they're trying to cover my kickoffs, they'd sometimes lose him because Ekeler is small. Like I don't know, he's probably closer to 5'6", 5'7", than whatever he's listed. I'm not even sure what he's listed at, but he's not a big guy. So you can lose him behind those lines, and that gives him an advantage. That it's harder to see him sometimes. And he's really quick with his cuts. So that combination is something that they will miss. So how do you replace him? Well, they have Jeremy McNichols. We saw what he did on that touchdown pass to Terry McLaurin, picking up the blitzing linebacker. I mean, that was as good a block as you're going to see, especially given the situation that it transpired in. So he'll be one of the guys. You can always call up Chris Rodriguez. They know that Brian Robinson can do more than just run the ball. but it's good to give guys a break. So, but they can throw the ball to Robinson as well. The hard part, though, is the way they were using Eckler and Robinson together. That was a really good combination. Even if it's only like 7 to 10 times a game, it's a good combination for those 7 to 10 times. And you would see guys multiple times when they use those two guys together, you would see how they could fool the defense with that by sending Eckler in motion, by just the action of the play after the snap. They really took advantage of the defense not sure who's going to get the ball and where. They can both do things out of the backfield. And so I think that's something that you're going to miss, that versatility. You can put another guy out there. It doesn't mean the defense is going to respond the same way. So I don't know. I'll be curious to see how they handle that, but that's what they can do there. But again, you're talking about needing a couple guys to replace an Eckler because of what he also does in the return game as well. So also today, on Wednesday, Jaden Daniels was named the NFC Offensive Player of the Week. That's the first time someone from this organization has been honored since Adrian Peterson 2018, and the first quarterback since Kirk Cousins in 2017. So a pretty big honor for a guy who just a couple weeks ago was named the offensive rookie of the week. So just continues to do what I think everybody had hoped he would do. He's doing it. Is he doing it quicker? I guess. But I would say this as someone who's covered him from the start in the spring and through the summer. I'm not surprised that he's off to a good start because it's just kind of who he is. And you didn't see the struggles, and you saw a certain series where it wasn't as good, or it wasn't as good, maybe a day, but you didn't see a prolonged struggle ever with him. And so that's why it's not a surprise he's off to a good start. And there's still a lot more they can do. I mean, he has 2 touchdown passes. That's going to probably get better. But the key is too that he's not turning it over. That's why this team is 2-1 because of what they've done offensively, but they're not turning it over. Now you're not forcing turnovers, but you're not turning it over. And with a rookie quarterback to be in that situation, pretty damn good. So I reiterate this, that all the talk about McLaurin has to get the ball more. What didn't he do? He didn't force it to him, and that's maturity. So you've heard me talk about this. I don't want to harp on that too much, but I do think that that's something that stands out. So we're talking today, and obviously we're out here in Arizona. We're back where he played college ball. But before I get to the Arizona State stuff, that's interesting for the people around here. I'm gotta believe it's a little bit odd for him to be back on campus because he did transfer, and there were some people here who weren't happy, but he was a guy that fans loved when he was here, and it's easy to see why. I mean, the playing ability, the personality, and all that. So I'm sure it's a little bit odd for him to be here, but a lot of what we're talking about is just what's going on here with Washington. And it's funny because we asked Bobby Wagner was talking about Daniels and just how he responded to that game Monday night, and he comes into the facility today out here, and he's like, he clearly, had his head down going to work already. Like he saw him, you see him in the playbook or whatever you're doing, but he's working. And so you turn that page. And the one thing that Daniel said a couple of times is that it was just another game. In other words, yes, a lot of good things happen in that game, but it's only one game. So you build and you build and you build. And now he's had 3 pretty, 2 good games, and a third that's for a rookie was pretty good. And so you just keep building on it. But if you get caught up in what you just did, you're not going to advance, because humility, is always around the corner here. So there's always right around the corner is a chance to go. You take your career in a different direction, and I don't think he wants to do that. So that's why he's just like, it was just another game, another day, another dollar. And it's about going to work. And it's funny because, this is always sometimes kind of fun to see how the other veterans react to a guy like this, because, Bobby Wagner goes out there and starts kind of heckling him from afar and chiding him a little bit. And he tried, Jaden's kind of smiling sheepishly and trying to ignore it, just trying to come back with a little bit of something. Hard to do that with Wagner. Wagner went toe to toe back in the day with guys like Richard Sherman, Cam Champ. So that was kind of, the strong mind, a strong-willed group in Seattle when he was a rookie doing that, and they would test him. So I don't, he's not gonna lose a little verbal chiding to Jaden Daniels at this point. Then the linemen walked by, a group of the linemen walked by, Allegretti, Wiley, a few others, and they're kind of yelling to him and all that. But I think what you see is a team that seems to really like being together. Now, does that matter? Well, yeah. And how much can that help in terms of wins and losses? Well, it doesn't hurt. I will say that. And, I think it's funny because I think even with Quinn, that the feeling you get is that, guys like playing for him for sure. And nobody wants to let the guy down. So I think, that's just something that, you know, that was something I was talking about with Chick Hernandez from Channel 9, just like that's the stuff you hear. So, and that matters. Like Joe Gibbs had that. I'm not saying that Dan Quinn is Joe Gibbs. There's a hell of a long way to go. And Gibbs is a different level of coach than anybody I've ever covered. But in terms of like how the players reacted to him, like the not wanting to let a guy down, you certainly see some of that in here. I also think that he's done a good job surrounding himself with coaches who have similar mindset and approaches that he does. So that's where it starts to filter down. I think, Ron Rivera was a guy that a lot of players respected and liked, but I don't think he surrounded himself with the coaches that demanded that or commanded that sort of same level of respect. Whereas I think Quinn has done a better job with that. So anyways, the other thing we're talking about too, like, there are a lot of people out there talking about Jaden Daniels on social media. Aaron Rodgers talked about him. I mean, players praising him and what they saw on Monday night. And it's funny because he's like, that matters to him, that guys that he's looked up to or whatever, that they're saying this. But it's funny because he doesn't get overly impressed with himself. I think he clearly knows what he can do and how good he is and can be. But he said, I think he plays for different reasons than for that. I mean, he wants to be really good, but then he also says that, what matters to him too is that maybe there was a kid who turned on the game for the first time Monday night and could get inspired by something he did. And I think that's the kind of stuff that comes out, and that's not fake. I've been around some guys who would say stuff like that. And you're like, well, yeah, I think you're kind of BSing, but you don't get that sense with Daniels at all. So, but I just think that's kind of who he is. And then, the other thing, like Dan Quinn talked about with Daniels, is the ability to connect with teammates. And it goes back to what I said earlier about guys walking by and chiding and all that. It's a good-natured situation. And they like that, the way he works. They like that when after a field goal, the first guy off the field to greet him is Jaden Daniels. They greet the hold, they greet Tress Way, greet the kicker, greet everybody. So I think some little things like that do matter to guys because they pay attention to that. And it's not all about him. It's about the team. And it's why I always go back to when he says he wants to do his 111. Well, that 111 the other night was being kind of Superman, but that was his job. And he filled his job just like somebody else did their job. And so I think when you have that approach and you don't put yourself above others, if you maintain that, it's going to go a long way to have some long-term success. And it's funny because the other thing you said about the game is like, you're a young man, you have to, at least in your private moments, feel like, man, that was something. You can be excited, you can be geeked, but you've got to keep things in perspective for yourself, because the goal is not to just, the goal coming in the NFL wasn't to have a great game against Cincinnati on Monday night. The goal was to become a great player. And you don't become that if you become too impressed with yourself. So, and even he said, the games in the past, quote, don't mean nothing no more. Now, that's the mindset. It's over, move on, because he has, and that's how you get better. So the other thing is, like, so the practice setup here is a little bit not funky, but it's just, not what we're used to. It's 107 degrees outside, so they're practicing in a bubble. And so that's fine, right? It's one bubble, and they brought a lot of stuff from Virginia here to do it. Nothing more needs to be said. It's football practice. But what I think it also speaks to, though, is the new era with owner Josh Harris, because we know that he spent a lot of money. Coming out here for the week is not cheap, because you're housing how many players? Like, there's 70 players or so, and then you have all the coaches and the staffers and all that. It's a big expense. And I don't know that it happens in the previous ownership because it never did happen. This was a unique situation, but it does seem like something that was done to help the players, first of all, recover. You don't have to fly back and then fly back out 3 days later. So, but I think it does cost some money, and Josh Harris ponied it up. So we also talked to Mike Samerstill too. And one thing to know, first of all, he played a lot of the outside corner the other night, and we saw the touchdown pass a lot to Ja'Marr Chase. But he did come back and he still makes plays. I think part of the thing they like about it, well, I know the thing we've talked about this, but they love the kind of competitor he is. And you see that, and I said this back in training camp, like, he's not going to be an outside corner here. When this is all said and done, whether it's this year, next year, or whatever, Dan Quinn tends to get big corners. But one thing you can take to the bank with Samerstill is he's a really good competitor. So if you don't have better options, I'm putting one of my best competitors on anybody, because if nothing else, like, are they going to succeed every play? No, he's not. He's not Deion Sanders. He's not Darrell Green, but you know what you're going to get out of him. And that's why, like, I'm telling you, he is not a big guy. And sometimes I watch him, like, he's playing inside, and when he goes in the slot, like, you're inside and you're going up against, you're basically like a line, almost like a linebacker at times. He's not big. So how do you survive in there? You compete and you watch him take on guys, and it's really impressive. So if you're going to take, like, I need a guy who I know can go out there and just do this, he'll do that. Now, again, it may not be, Ja'Marr Chase is really damn good. So you're going to give up touchdown. Benjamin St. Juice gave up on one to him later. So you're going to get beat by those guys, but you need a guy who's out there to compete, because, and even Samerstill said, Darrell Green told him about the 10-second rule. Give yourself 10 seconds or whatever by the time you walk to the bench. Get it all out, yell at yourself, do this. But when you sit down, you've got to move on. Because if you don't move on, you're going to have a short career in this game. So I think he does that very well. And I think that's one reason why they put him out there, for sure. And I think, again, ultimately, you want him inside. I think that's where he's going to fit best. But until then, you put him where you need him. And I will say, Emmanuel Forbes is probably going to play on Sunday. So they could always go back to Forbes and St. Juice. My guess is that's probably what they'll do. Don't know that for sure, but it makes sense. But if something happens with Forbes, if he's struggling a little bit, then you can make your changes. Because Igbenogany, I think has done a nice job when he's been in there. So you can roll with that group if you need to, if Forbes isn't handling his business, for sure. So I think that's a good thing for them. And especially, the funny thing is, like, this week, you have one receiver that you really have to be concerned about with Marvin Harrison Jr., and I'll talk more about him later in the week. The other thing we know is the defense needs to be fixed. I mean, it hasn't been good. And I know people are like, why aren't you asking about it? Because, first of all, Jaden Daniels is a story this week. We know there are other problems. It doesn't mean that people are ignoring them just because they're not, like, the team knows what the issues are. They don't need us to remind them. And because they aren't very good on defense. I will say, would you rather have a really good defense, right? Because this roster is not full, or finished by any means. And nobody should have come into the season feeling like everything was fixed. And not saying that you did, but if you did, you shouldn't think like that, because they're not at that point in the development of this roster, of this group. But if you could say, like, you want to find your corners, you want to find your quarterback. Well, I'm going to take the quarterback because they haven't had one in forever. We've seen some good defenses here, that we haven't seen consistently good quarterback play for a long time. And so, not to say you shouldn't want both, but I think when you're building a program, what do you want to see first? And so, now, having said that, defense needs to be better. We know that, because you go into Sunday's game against Arizona, you can't rely on Jaden Daniels in the offense to score points on every drive. Like, they've won 2 games because of that. And that's a tough way to live. So you're going to have to create stops and turnovers. And they know this, like, they know they're going to punt again. They know there's going to be turnovers at some point. So you need the defense to do its part, and it has not. So it's funny, because in preparation for this, I've been watching the Cardinals and watching them against Detroit. And what stood out to me with Detroit, and they have a really good defense, they play fast in the front, and they are in their gaps. And you're not seeing that here. You're seeing Like I even asked Dan Quinn, are you guys playing with the speed you want to? And the answer right now is no. And it's clear to see that. And they're also not filling gaps, or guys are getting out of gaps. And so it's consistently something wrong, right? And sometimes, again, it could be the math. It could be you're going to keep two safeties deep. Well, you may sometimes have a gap that's not filled, but it's not always that. It's a lot of things, but I don't think they're playing to the speed that they need to. And you know who agrees with that? Dan Quinn. And because he said, they're not. And it's like, it's, what did he say? What did he say? Let me tell you what he said. It's not where we'll end up. And he said, we're not to the space where we'll be. And so I think, but he also agreed, like they're not playing the speed they need to yet because it's still, I know you don't want to hear it's new, but it's only 3 games. But my thing is too with that, well, then you need to see consistent improvement. Are we going to see that? And it is funny because there are sometimes even last week against the Bengals where there are a couple of runs where you're like, all right, this guy makes the tackle back here, it's a 2-yard loss, but they miss the tackle and it's a 12-yard gain. So that's sometimes the difference between the stats looking better or not. But the problem is that quarterbacks are picking them apart on 3rd down too. So that's got to stop. So if it doesn't stop, you're going to have to do something about it. And it's not like they just do a straight 4-man rush every time. I'm seeing some stunts. I saw some different action or whatever, and some different alignments, but it just hasn't worked. So they have to, they have some guys who are young, some guys are new, some guys who are this. It's got to be better. And so but don't worry, like it is something they know, and it is something that is obvious. But I think for right now, you need to get better. That's all there is to it. For right now, though, I do think that there's so much focus on Jaden Daniels because of the importance of that position, obviously. But it doesn't mean that people are ignoring the other stuff. It just means that the story this week is Jaden Daniels. And when you're out, like for example, we're out at a press conference, we only get 2 questions. And just because someone else asked 2 questions about Jaden Daniels, it may mean that like, well, that's fine. But for my story, I need this angle or this quote. We don't all write the same angle on a story. So what someone else needs may be complementary to what I need, but I may still need more to flesh out something else. So that's why I say the story this week is Daniels. It doesn't mean that people think like, oh, well, the defense is great. No, they're not. We know that. But I'm writing to my story as are other people. Cliff Kingsbury coming back to Arizona, that's also a story. So I think there's a lot of things that you have to look at that. But the story on the defense is not playing fast, getting out of gaps, and sometimes that's discipline, etc. Or sometimes just could be technique, it could be confusion, whatever it is, but they're not playing to the speed they need to just yet. So and again, if it doesn't get better, then you're going to need Jay Daniels and the offense to never punt again if you want to do more than just look good at times. So anyway, that's it for me. A reminder, I will be back on Friday morning with another episode. I'm hoping to get up a special guest for that, but I also will have ESPN's Josh Weinfuss to talk about the Cardinals' Kyler Murray, his take on Cliff Kingsbury, and then see if he remembers Jaden Daniels at Arizona State since he's based out here and what his return here means and what the perception of him is around here. But a lot, again, Kingsbury, was it just, I'm curious, like the offense that he ran there. And I had Josh on in the offseason when Kingsbury was hired, but I am curious to always get his input or his opinion on all of this. So, and I'll also do my 5 things this weekend as well. So anyway, that's it for me. You Gold members, 7:30 Eastern time on Friday. And I'll be back with another episode on Friday for everybody else. We'll talk to you next time.